strategizes with enterprise companies, with government agencies and municipalities on various things such as digital transformation, corporate governance, and operational changes. So without further ado, Guðrún, thank you for joining us today, and we'll get the workshop started.
Well, thank you, Paula, and nice to be here with you today. Just to give you a little bit of background where I come from and what I've been doing for the last decades. I'm getting so old, it's in decades, not in years. But I did my university education abroad. I went to Ottawa in Canada and studied there Bachelor of Commerce, and then I took my MBA in Holland in Nyenrode University, when it was still in Iceland, very unique to have an MBA degree, but today it's very common. So it's quite a few years since I finished there, 94, and then before in Ottawa, 91. When I came home after my MBA, there was a recession in Iceland. So basically I was very lucky to get a job. I started with Einskip, as you probably know. The Einskip is one of the two larger what do you call it, import. It's vessels, they're running vessels between and importing most of the goods and exporting them by sea. I was there in the bulk division. There has never been a female before in the front line, so I was the first female. And when I went on board the vessels that were coming in to the harbor, a lot of the guys on board thought I was representing the oldest trade of women, not being the agent, because they'd never seen a woman agent before. So it was quite interesting, being only 25 years old, that, you know, they found it very surprising. You know, towards us. Then I started as a quality manager at Landsvirkjun, which is the national power company in Iceland. Again, there I was the first manager. And there was not the same problem as when I went aboard the vessels, but it was more that I wasn't an engineer or knew anything about electricity, so they were not very open towards me coming in. But again, it's about changing attitudes, and that's why I'm telling you to talk to you about. It was a little bit long intro, but it's important for me to know that you know where I'm coming from. And what I like for you to think of is that I think that women, even though we have one guy here in the room, and I'm glad to see one guy, and maybe someone on the other side of the streaming, is that I think there's an incredible opportunity for women today to be part of the new business, the new way of doing things. Because we are the biggest consumer group in the world, we have a better sense for what consumers really need. And the old way of doing things was that the company decided what the consumer, what the client needed, but today it is the consumer or the client who will decide what he or she needs and then go out and look for it. And that's where I think is a big opportunity for us women. So in the old way of doing things, we had this very hierarchical structure. Today, we're looking at ecosystems, and we have all kinds of examples of that. For example, just my small company, we intentionally don't want to become too big of a company because we rather like to build our ecosystem. So we are experts in certain fields, and we connect with other experts if we need them. And I think that is a way of going forward, and it gives you much more flexibility. Because once you have a hierarchy like that, the old way of doing things, you have too much overhead. And it's too risky in a sense that we had the bank crisis in 2008, now we have COVID. If you don't have the flexibility built within your company, whether it's small or large, you're going to have much more difficulties adjusting to all these crises or changes that will happen. And they will just continue, and they will continue at a greater speed, I think, into the future than we have already experienced. So one thing that is important to know before you start to take your idea and develop it into a project and even take it further into a business is, how am I going to structure it? You need to think of it all the way to the end before you start taking your first steps. Because at each step you take is towards either the old way of doing things or using and making the most of out of the opportunities that are there. Because networks like this is an incredibly good way of getting connected. You hear that, oh, you're an expert in that, great, can we connect together? And that's how I met Paula. She was very open through FKA, getting connections, and Iceland is a perfect place in the sense that it's small and it's very easy to get connected. It can be a challenge. I don't experience myself as being an Icelander, but it can be more of a challenge when you're coming as a foreigner into Iceland. But connecting, that is the way of getting things done here in Iceland. And it's even, I think, in a shorter time period, it's easier if you're persistent with it. And that's, I think, you need to think of when you're trying to develop your ideas into more of a project. So moving away from the old way of thinking into the new way of thinking, and coming back to the thing that I said before, that I think women have a great opportunity now to take the lead in the new way of thinking, is that we think more of what is the job that needs to be done. Rather than before, it would be, okay, all the do-it-yourself stores are very occupied and displaying in advertisements all these nice drills and all these guys. And when I used to work at Biko, it was like the goodie store for the men was to go to Biko on Saturdays to look at all the new tools. Whereas it's more from our point of view, we were looking at, I just need a hole to hang up a picture or to fasten the bookshelves. And that is the way customers just think today in general, is that I need a solution to my problem. So that is what we call an outside-in thinking versus an inside-out thinking. That are either running projects or running businesses or government, we need to understand what our clients or customers really want. What are their needs? And from then on, we design our companies, rather than we will tell them, like I said before. So instead of looking at all these changes in the environment, and I'm sure you're not there, but a lot of people, especially in the government, look at it as a threat, the digitalization, because so many of the unions have been talking about that there will be jobs lost. But in Iceland, just around Second World War, 75% of the population in Iceland were farmers. They're not that today. So of course they will be changing. And there are some jobs already that are changing, but something else comes instead. So we just have to be sure that we don't get outdated, and that's our own responsibility. So we have to reskill ourselves, so we are able to take on the new challenges and new opportunities at the same time. For me, opportunity is one side of the coin and the challenge is on the other side of the coin. It depends on how you're going to use that challenge and create an opportunity. So the top skills that the World Economic Forum lists up for 2025 are here on the screen. And when you look at those top 10 skills, they are what we often call soft skills. So being able to communicate, being able to analyze, to be able to learn, to solve problems, critical thinking, creativity, it is more the softer skills that we need into the future. And of course you need to be able to use the technology, but you don't have to know everything about the technology. You just have to know the right person that knows about everything about the technology. So you can plug them together. And that is why the ecosystem thought of running a business or running a project, it's much more beneficial, because nobody can tick in all these boxes. That would be a unique person. So you need to connect and find the strengths within yourself and then find other people within your network to help you fill or tick a box to all these 10 skills that have been listed. And World Economic Forum renews this list every 5 years. And it's interesting to see that the softer skills, the more where we really have to use our knowledge to build on, are becoming always stronger. The critical thinking, the learning part, they're always moving up the list. And more the hardcore are moving down the list. So, and from that point of view, it's interesting. Like you see here, problem solving, self-management, working with people, they group them down, and technology, use and development. You will notice, if you look at the list from 2020, that this has changed. And it will continue. So even though we're talking about digital transformation in daily environment, it doesn't mean that, you know, we have machines taking over. We just need to use more our head and our heart in what we do every day. And moving into that, and what we're going to do in, after lunch is to start to use some tools that I like to introduce to you if you don't know them already. And one of them is the canvas. And the canvas is originally, they were, what's the word now? I'm losing the word. What's the word? Sprotafyrirtæki. Startups. Thank you. I'm not so used to thinking in English as I was before. Yes, startups. Startups have used more canvas than traditional companies, but with a new way of thinking, established companies, even public sector entities, are starting to use the canvas. Because what the canvas does, it focuses on the customer point. That is what helps with digital mindset. So how many of you have used Canvas? They're in here. Okay? 3. So good. So there are at least some experts here. But it is more of a structure to help you, because I think we have a tendency to start to answer the question how, but not who. So we need to know who are our customers. Then we will ask, the next question is what are we offering them? What's the value proposition? Then we will ask ourselves how we're going to deliver that value proposition. And then at the end, we say, why? Is it a non-profit? Is it a profit? What do I need? Okay? So another simple, this is a typical canvas, and it's very easy to get online. I mean, you can find every stuff online, but you think you can simplify it a little bit instead of making it too complicated, especially when you have an idea that you want to turn into a project or a startup. What is the customer segment that I'm looking at, and what are the needs that I need to fulfill? And then you go into the value, like I said before, and then you want to see how you're going to deliver that, with what kind of resources, what kind of partners, where is my ecosystem, am I doing everything myself, am I getting more people on board? And then you look at the business case behind it, the cost structure and revenue structure. And this is going to be one of the 3 assignments you're going to have after lunch that you can experience using this if you like. But there are also some other tools that that you can use. So the upper part is how you create the value for the company and the customer, because it's a win-win situation. And then the lower part is how do you capture that value? Because you want to think of in the long run, how am I going to continuously build on this value proposition at the top for the longer run, so you can even continue further. And there are companies like Amazon that has been using Canvas for a long time. And I think it is a tool to be able to maintain the entrepreneur spirit, in the sense that you always, when you have a little idea, that you want to make into a bigger one, you're much more closer to thinking of what is the need that I'm fulfilling, rather than when you're building up a big structure and you get lost in the purpose of what you're doing regularly. You lose contact with your customers. When you're building these hierarchical structures, it's very easy to build up overhead, and we get all occupied on about internal issues rather than thinking about the external issues and thinking about the customers. And we all have had our experience with good services or bad services, or good products or bad products. And I think when we really see these huge companies fail, it is because they've lost contact with the customers. It is not because something was not really done well enough with the educational training program within. It could be in the long run, but it's usually you lost what it is really that your customer needs. And there are many good stories to tell about that, but I don't have the time here today, but you know the most famous one is like Kodak, that even developed the digital camera. No, we don't need that. Put it on in the drawer. I mean, and there are Nokia phones, and there's a lot of companies, big companies, that become almost too arrogant in the old way of doing things and forget to keep that connectivity with their customers. So that's one thing that it's always important. You need to be sure that you're addressing the needs of your customer regardless of what you're doing. So one thing that has also changed with the digital mindset and digital transformation is how we go about creating a strategy and then implementing a strategy. And like I always say, creating a strategy, that's the easy peasy part of it. You can put all these beautiful words on a paper, or put this beautiful picture about where you're going, but getting there, that's the challenge. So what we are looking at more today is that we need to have a clear vision of where we're going. You can take this into a small startup, or you can have it for a huge company. You need to know where you're going, what are the values that you are going to nurture on this journey of yours, and then for the strategy and the product and the service you're delivering, it becomes like a lean loop. You're always learning, because by learning by doing is the best way of implementing your strategy and getting your strategy more focused on where you want to go. Because there's always something that happens. Like COVID has taught us, you can never be too sure that tomorrow is going to be the same as today. So you always have to revisit your strategy. It's a total learning process, and you have to measure it and see what's working and what's not working. And working with people, I mean, people are just very unpredictable in general. We can't read minds yet, at least not me. So we never know exactly how people are going to react. We hope we know, but you never know exactly. And that's why implementing strategy is very close to change management, in the sense that you're always trying to predict how people are going to react to what you're trying to present, but you never are sure, so you always have to reevaluate how you're moving forward. So how am I doing on the time?
You're good, you have 20 minutes.
Okay, good. I can stand here the whole day.
Apologies for the noise.
So I'm moving really fast through this, but because a lot of this information is readily available if you Google things, but it's just to try to get you to think a little bit out of the box. So what we'd like to see more today is this outside thinking, learning orientation, agile execution. We're always, having shorter implementation periods. Cross-silo collaboration, the ecosystem, also partnering there. Cross-silo can be more within the company, but you can also think of it outside. And then data enrichment. And there's one thing, even though we have learned a lot in Iceland about using data in COVID, and I'm working a lot with the health sector, public sectors, both hospitals outside of Reykjavik and the primary care. We are not very used to using data. There's a lot of data, but using the data, So when we come to the doctor or we need to talk to a nurse, they don't have anything about us except for our kennitala and our name. And I'm actually working on a pretty interesting project now. We're designing a new primary care facility close to the airport. And we want to design it as this modern primary care facility. But the problem is, again, that because it's a publicly owned, it's part of the governmental businesses, there's so much we can do in implementing digital solutions, because where all the information about us, our health information, that is owned and run by the government. So we can't change that. But just having the talk with the doctors and explaining them, what would you think that you would, have someone come in and you would have on your screen, red, green, yellow lights telling you immediately where you need to address this patient. Because often we go and I have a little sore here on my arm, I need that fixed. But maybe that is my least concern, because maybe that is just a result from something underlying. And so there's a lot of opportunities for taking known structures that we have today and trying to make them more modernized. And that's why it's even more of a challenge and more interesting for me as a consultant to work with the public sector than the private, because there's so much you can do, so much change you can see. But we're seeing a lot of changes here. So there was a study done by EY company. It's a consultancy as well as what do you call it? Endurskoðendur. Accountants, yeah. And they identified 8 forces to shape the future of the customer. And what I thought was, I like the picture, is just, it shows that you have a smart consumer. I mean, we are becoming better and better consumers every day. We are, I hope. But we are more informed. Even when we go to the doctor, we have Googled it online, what it might be possibly wrong with me. And then you just need the insurance. And usually we don't know it, but we think we know it. But so we are looking around. We can shop around for some ideas. You have the comparison. If you see a TV or whatever you want to shop, you Google it first and see the review, so you're more educated. We also have at home, we live in interconnected homes now. So everything there is becoming a little bit more digitalized. We use more technology today, but we like to play with a lot of things, and the gaming age groups where everything has to be gaming oriented. The work environment, it's also becoming a lot of challenges there. Getting people back to the office after COVID is a big challenge. And then in Iceland, you have shortened the work week, which is even more challenge. So getting the office glue, there are challenges as well. So these are all challenges that organizations have to take into account now. So it's not only digitalization, but it's always behind it. And people are moving around. They have now 2 offices. Many people have that, so it's easy how we consume our food. We are more health conscious. We are more, oops, sorry. I was fixing my mic. And we of course like to stay healthy. So it is becoming more complicated to run a business than it was before, because we consumers are becoming more complicated. But at the same time, we are becoming more smart. So we are not looking at, we can't have as broad segments that we look at. We need to look at smaller segments, because the variables are so many, and there are so many challenges behind it. And because our expectations as consumers are becoming much more dispersed than we were before, we have a higher demand of having personalization, speed, and ease. These are the 3 most important things when we think about. Our tolerance is very low. I mean, when we are connected, whether we are connected directly via our phones through 5G or 4G, or we are having a Wi-Fi connection, if it doesn't, deliver it in seconds, we get frustrated. At least I do. So that's the tolerance for everything. And what has been interesting now for the last few weeks, I've noticed, for example, Valitor and SaltPay and these deliverance enable us to pay with credit cards. Again and again, they've been problems. And they say it's because somebody is trying to hack the system. But it surprises me that it's happening with these short time periods. Why haven't they done anything from the last hacking to the current hacking? Maybe the hackers are always a step ahead of them, I don't know. But we are so dependent on this technology that if we would, it's easier for us to react to COVID and go back home. But if, we would have no internet for a week or two, I don't know what we would do. We couldn't watch the TV. Some people couldn't even watch their clothes because the washing machines are, smart machines, and I think sometimes we take things for granted what we have. So it's interesting, but at the same time it's a bit scary. So, but there's a lot of opportunities for us also to build on this. So in general, coming back to, there's endless opportunities out there. It's just finding the target consumers, the consumer group, the client group that you want to serve. And I think because we like personalized, we like speed, we like to have the service we buy delivered in as short time as possible, and it's easy for us to use it. I think it's more opportunity for entrepreneurs and startups to tap into some kind of a need that is out there, even though it's just a small group. Big is not always beautiful. I think smaller is even more beautiful often. And that's why I come back to the thing. I think it's a lot of opportunities out there for us, both women and men, but for us maybe that are more in sync with the needs in the market to, tap into that. Because it's all about customer experience. We call ourselves a boutique consultancy. And the only thing we think about each and every product is that we deliver a positive customer experience. Because if we don't do that, we can't expect that the next client will come on board or that we can continue with the same client. And I think that's important in all industries or all sectors. You need to ensure that you have a positive experience. Just again, are you going to be the time? Yeah, you let me know when I have 5 minutes left. So we all know, when we go to a restaurant and we have the best food ever, but if the service is not good, we're not likely to go back. It's the whole experience that is what delivers the value. And the same is when we go to a store or we have a project with someone, we are just very, in general, critical about what kind of services or experience we are having. And that is becoming more demanding from the customer's point of view. So coming back to practical, another tool for you is, okay, I have an idea, I have a project, I know where I want to go, I know on what basis I want to do it through my values, but how am I going to, draw up the roadmap? How am I going to how I'm going to keep myself focused on my long-term vision? So you need to have some kind of a goal, some kind of objectives that you want to follow through. And often this is in Iceland a very tricky business with measurements and goal settings, because we are not just general good in doing it, because the phrase, it reddast. We are just, we take up our sleeves and jump into the pool, and we will just, swim and swim, and we don't really know where we're swimming, and we will just continue because that is what we need to do, right? So measurements are a key tool to enable you to move forward. And one thing you need to know about measurements is that you want both to have measurements that are lagging and also measurements that are leading. And leading measurement is something that will predict into the future. You're predicting something into the future and you're taking back to a business. Whereas lagging is something that has already happened. Like a simple measurement to tell you about what is a lagging measurement is customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction. That is a lagging measurement. Whereas leading measurement could be sick days for employees, could be number of complaints by customers. So you always need to have something that tells you, okay, good to know about the past, but you need to look into the future and see what indicators are there that you can use to enable you to react and prepare for the future. So KPIs are at the top level here, and then you go all the way down to operational measures and performance measures. And I'm going to show you a little bit later some ideas about that. Here again is about the leading and lagging. Lagging, analyze the past. Leading, influence future performance. And you need both. So one thing that you're going to do, one of the exercises that you can choose from after lunch, is to draw up your key performance indicators. And it is a good exercise. You can take even, it doesn't have to be an idea you're working on or a project you're working on. You can do it even for yourself. Because an easy thing, and a good example that we often have, we can be really good at going to the gym every day. But if we don't have any objectives, we'll probably always be in the same spot. We're stuck in the same spot. It's the same with running a company or a business idea. If you don't have something that drags you, pulls you into the future, some measurements that you're going to challenge yourself, you're always going to be stuck in the same place. Maybe that's okay, but not in the long run. You need to have something that moves you forward. So I don't think I have the time to go into this detail because I want to show you another as well. But
8 minutes.
yeah. So this is an exercise we will do later for you to look at how can I use KPIs for my idea or for the business I'm working with. And here are also some descriptions on that. But you've heard about this, SMART goals, right? And it sounds like, just somebody was really smart in putting a phrase on that. But it's a good thing, to think of. It has to be specific, it has to be measurable, it has to be attainable, realistic, and time-bound. And it's just a really good way of remembering it when I'm setting up my KPIs. Are they smart or are they not? And if they're not, I need to do something about it. Often you see people putting up objectives. They're like a tick in a box. By this date, I should have this finished. That is not an objective because it doesn't pull you forward. It's just tick in a box. You should maybe look at, okay, what is the result of having that done that I will be measuring for a longer time period? But this is a learning by doing exercise as well, because we need to always rethink and try to be better, because often you see that some measurements are not really that good. So you need to change them and not be afraid of it, and not be afraid of changing the way you describe your objectives. Because the more you review it, the better they get. And this is the third tool that I want to put in here for you to use later on, is OKUR. And Google is maybe the most famous one for using this. OKR, not Q, like I said. And that's another way of doing the same thing, but it's just a little tool that is a different way. You're breaking it in. Instead of having one main objective, you're breaking it into smaller ones. So you're trying to, we often talk about, you have the big elephant in the room and you have to put it in small pieces. The same with objectives. Because it's easier to have them more clear, nearer to you in the time frame than in always looking into the longer term. So pulling them back to you so that you can ensure and also get the reinforcement, because measurements can help you reinforce that you're really on track. So OKR helps you more to break down the KPIs. So it often is, and again, I think more of the startup scene is using OKRs than just general idea about KPIs, like I showed you the pyramid before. And finally, I just want to, this is a tool that I've been using for strategy implementation. And again, it's so important that you have find your own tools and techniques that suit you well. But again, it can help you also think of your ideas and projects, because in order to implement a strategy successfully, you need to have the right people with the right skills and knowledge. You need to have the business case in place. You need to be able to communicate it. You need to be able to measure it, KPIs, OKRs. You need to have the culture. You need to have that people are ready to take on, either to accept the services that you are going to offer or they want to buy it, or that the culture within the company is ready to work with you. You need to have the processes in place. You need to be able to reinforce it, because we easily lose, our attention span is not very long, so we all easily get distracted. And then you have to regularly review it. And a colleague of mine who is situated in Singapore, Robin Spekulant, he has written a couple of books about this, and we got hooked up in 2008. And I've been using this with my clients to help them focus. It's simple, but it can be really powerful when you use it in a very systematic way. And another thing that he has also developed is the ticking clock model, which is another tool that is out there that he and another colleague of his has developed, which is more focused on the digital transformation. And there you need to implement future thinking, you need to have the operations, customers, and culture in place, and you have to be ready for the future. And then he goes through all these different elements, and there are 11 elements there. And again, all these models, techniques, that just help you focus it. And you can do whatever you want to do with it, but it is, I just want to throw it in here for you to, you can use it, you can easily Google this as well, and you can use it to match with your ideas. Have I, thought of the digital vision that I have? Because one thing that I maybe, so I won't forget, there's so many of the old companies that think that we will implement all these digital solutions if we don't have a digital strategy. Digitalization is just a way of doing things. It is not a separate strategy. So that's why the first part of it is to just get companies or governmental agencies, municipalities to understand that what you're doing with implementing digitalization is delivering and the services that the customer needs. So again, what is the job that needs to be done? This is a model that you can use to be able to ensure that you're addressing the job that needs to be done, not that you're thinking it from the inside out, but the outside in. Are you following me? Okay. So that was the last slide.
Nice. You're 2 minutes early, even. So thank you so much, Guðrún. And just on the digital strategy part, I have to plug the next step and next phase of the workshops. On the 11th of December, we're going to be working with Sister through the University of Reykjavik to offer a workshop on Python and getting the basics of coding in order. So
that they were always in the private sector, you just brought up, at least I was brought up in the companies I was working with, it's always a win-win situation. You know, I do my best, I will get a reward for that. But what I was most shocked with when I came into the public sector is that regardless what I did as a manager for the staff, they just wanted more and more and more. It was like, I felt like I had needy kids sometimes. And I said this, and I often said it, but yeah, it's a little bit maybe difficult with the streaming, but it's been so many years since I left. But sometimes I felt like I was running a kindergarten, but not an office, because it was more on the emotional level. And I don't know why that has happened, but I have experienced in many other agencies than I was running, but it's changing. And I think we're just having a younger generation, because what has happened when I started at the Lean 2009, a lot of the people that were working there had worked there for the whole life. Even though they were just 50 years old, they had worked there for 30 years. And I was shocked, because when I finished university, I said I was never going to stay longer than 7 years in the same spot. I'm probably going to break it now, because I've been 8 years with my company, so it's a little bit different, but I'm always having new challenges there. But so I think you just get too comfortable. So it's like, you know, being too comfortable at home, being too bossy at home. It's the same feeling. So it becomes a more emotional workplace than a business-oriented. But it is changing. There are new generations coming in. The Y generation, Z generation are bringing in new viewpoints, and I think it's becoming better. And especially with the digitalization in the governmental agencies, there's a lot of interesting opportunities. So
that's really great information to know too, because a lot of the ideas that people are surfacing, especially around developing positive community, understanding what's going on in the environments we live in, and the pain points that we see, we do need to understand kind of the mentality of the folks in the public sector versus the private sector if you're going to be trying to push your idea into adoption in these environments. So that's actually really helpful. Maybe we can explore that a little bit more in the workshop section. But I presume, oh yeah.
There was a lot in that presentation. It was really dense, lots of really great stuff. And I noticed when you spoke about your kind of inverted pyramid with strategy in the middle,
Yes.
the word that I didn't hear was anything about prioritization. To what extent does prioritization come into play, either in terms of strategy itself or in terms of this process of operationalizing a project?
All right, so repeat the question.
good question. Well, he was asking about why I didn't mention anything about prioritization when I was talking about strategizing. Well, strategizing is about two things. It's building up a broad ownership and prioritizing. But, you know, that was not my main focus on this presentation, but that is really, you start doing it when you're drawing up your strategy, you start to prioritize when you're mapping out your road, the road ahead, drawing up your roadmap. So you start to prioritize there, and in the loop, you're always prioritizing, because you just always have limited resources.
And also just finding the conflicting priorities through that strategization process, like you talked about stakeholders and bringing different groups together, and how those different groups will weigh in a different way, right? Even whether it's generational or it's cross-departmental. And I agree, there's some element of that where in the strategy process you might find that you have competing priorities, and how do you strategize around the competing priorities, and how do you put to, like, this might be a priority for this group but not necessarily for the overall scheme of things, and how do you decide that, and at what time frame does that secondary priority become the primary priority, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So if there's no other questions, I know I'm anxious to eat lunch. I don't know if anyone else is. But again, thank you for the presentation. Thank you all for joining us. And we'll continue on our kind of homework and workshopping our ideas. And we'll be sure to post the link to the presentation portion, and also maybe email some additional information after. So thanks once again. Visit WomenTechIceland.com if you need more information about us. And thank you again to Huawei for sponsoring this series with us. So thanks.
Thank you.